Welcome to the We Watch This podcast. I'm your host, Danielle. Ellen. And I'm joined by Marsha on film. How you doing?
God, I don't even know how to follow that. Look, I'm doing pretty well here in lockdown, mate. How are you?
Alexander Hamilton. I'm doing very well, Jackson. As if you couldn't tell, guys, we are going to be reviewing Hamilton.
If you didn't read it in the headline, you definitely heard it there in the intro.
But I'm doing well, Jackson. We've got a bunch of news before we get into our Hamilton review. It's on Disney+. If you haven't seen the buzz of this film, where have you been? It's at the top of the charts, I guess, on all the movie sites. And it's been a lot of buzz, a lot of talk about this film. And we're going to dive into it. But just before we do, we're going to take a look at a bit of the news lately. And first off, we had some sad news, didn't we, Jackson?
Yes. Well, even before we talk about the passing of one of the most famous film composers, other tragic news. Dan, here in Melbourne, Victoria, we're forced to record remotely again. What's happened?
Yeah, we're in lockdown again for another 6 weeks. And that Tenet... that Tenet...
You said it.
That Tenet release date is looking very...
There's the 3 uses of that cue gone. Thank you, Mr. Editor.
It's looking very shaky right now. I'm a little bit scared. I don't think... It might not even come out this year now. I'm torn, Jackson. I'm saddened. But there is some saving grace. There's some saving grace because we're going to be reviewing a film next week for our... what is it? 24th episode? 25th? It's going to be a 10-year anniversary.
Who knows at this rate, mate?
The 10th anniversary. 10-year anniversary of this film. And I'll reveal that film at the end of the podcast.
Ooh, how exciting. As you mentioned, Dan, this week saw the passing of 91-year-old film composer and absolute genius in cinema, Ennio Morricone. Dan, what was one of your favourite Ennio Morricone scores or pieces?
Well, the last one I saw from him would have been The Hateful Eight with Quentin Tarantino. But I'm not familiar with a lot of his work because a lot of it's Italian films, isn't it? I think it was The Untouchables that he did. Would that be right?
Oh, yes, absolutely. That's the, what were you thinking, Kevin Costner, Sean Connery, right?
Yeah, and also The Legend of 1900 as well was a good one. But yeah, what are your favourites from him?
I love his score on John Carpenter's The Thing. It's Ennio Morricone.
Did he do that?
He sure did, doing an impression of a John Carpenter score, and it smashes out of the park. And we couldn't be remiss without mentioning the Dollars trilogy featuring The Man with No Name, as well as Once Upon a Time in the West. So, just some true classics.
Was that the first time him and Quentin got together for a film?
Hateful Eight? I believe it was the first time they collaborated on a full score. However, if we go back through Tarantino's filmography, I believe he has several uses of some of Morricone's work sprinkled throughout. So this guy had a huge influence, not just on Westerns, not just on American cinema, but globally in the entertainment zeitgeist. So a tragic loss for the film and overall for the planet. Yes?
What I absolutely love is that he went out with a bang. He got his Oscar for The Hateful Eight.
Deservedly so. Awesome score in a very polarizing film.
He'd been nominated how many times? 6 or 7, and he finally got it done. That's awesome to see. Really,
only
really
6 or 7. My God, if John Williams can rack up 40 or so nominations, however many that guy has, surely we could have seen Morricone get a few more throughout his lifetime. But you said it, mate. He did a lot of spaghetti westerns, a lot of genre movies that the Academy doesn't always like to look as favourably upon. What was some of the other news that we had dropped this week, Dan?
Well, Florence Pugh and Black Widow. Apparently she could be taking over the role and moving forward sort of taking over Scarlett Johansson's role, which is interesting because we know we've got a lot of hype around her. She's young, she's bold, she's a great actress. She's got a lot of talent, and pop her in a Marvel film and just get her into that full stardom sort of territory.
Okay, well, there's our obligatory Marvel reference for the episode out of the way. So, comic book nerds, you can take a back seat. Hey, there was something else regarding movies and the industry on a whole that popped up featuring Florence Pugh in the last couple of weeks, Stan. And that was for the Academy, the Oscars, that is. So, did you hear about the Oscars had reached their goal to double their underrepresented list, I should say, and women within the official voting Academy by 2020?
Yeah, so how does that work? So the voting system's now like 50-50 women and men, or what? Or they've just doubled the women? How does that work?
I'll take you through some of the statistics. So this is officially released from the Oscars themselves. So this is for who they've invited in their 2020 class. There were over 819 people invited, and if they accept, that would boost the numbers to over about 10,000 people who vote for the films that are up to be nominated and then will subsequently win awards every year. 10,000 people, who knows if all 10,000 would nominate, but compare that to about 5 to 10 years ago, there were maybe 5,000 people and a lot of older 80-year-old rich white guys. Here is what the stats say for the 2020 class. 45% of the 2020 class are women, 36% are underrepresented ethnic and racial communities, and 49% of them are international, coming from over 68 countries. 75 Oscar nominees, 15 winners, and 5 recipients of scientific and technical awards. Dan, here are some of the standouts. Bobby Cannavale, Lakeith Stanfield, Ana de Armas, Chai Woo-sik from Parasite that we covered. One of your favourites, Ben Mendelsohn, Alexander Siddig from a Star Trek show, which we might cover in the future. John David Washington, what's he starring in? And how we got our way to this segment, Florence Pugh. And Dan, didn't Florence Pugh star in a movie last year that you just loved? No, it wasn't Little Women. No, it wasn't Part of My Family. It was Ari Aster's Midsommar. Ari Aster has been invited. Yeah. And I remember you saw The Witch and you quite enjoyed that. And we're going to be covering another movie from this director's filmography from last year very soon. Robert Eggers has been invited. And, drum roll please, Matt Reeves.
Oh, the Batman director, hey?
Robert Pattinson himself. So the 2020 class, a lot of young names, a lot of up-and-comers. Ana de Armas, who has been in some cracking movies as of late in the last few years. I'm looking forward if these people accept and what that means for the Oscars moving forward. Dan, there's some other live-action adaptations from another small independent studio that some of our listeners might know of, Walt Disney. We've got some news regarding Jude Law is currently in talks to play Captain Hook in a Peter Pan adaptation. What are your thoughts?
Take it out of the back and shoot it, honestly. Hugh Jackman's worst film he ever did was Pan. He was a standout in the film. He was great. You know, I love him. But the movie was absolute trash.
What did the critics make of that?
Oh, you don't want to know.
Did they pan it?
I didn't even see that coming. But anyway, yeah, Pan was shocking. Jude Law, please, I'm begging you, do not take this role, man. Please, you can do better, okay? Captain Hook, take it out the back and shoot it, my opinion.
Well, you're not looking forward to a Peter Pan adaptation. Would you be looking forward to a prequel of the Mad Max series? In fact, a spin-off of Imperator Furiosa. Sadly, not featuring Charlize Theron. What do you reckon?
Why not? Why not bring her back? She looks pretty young. She's like 45. She looks in her
25.
30s. Yeah, she looks really young. With a bit of prosthetics or whatever, you can get her back. I don't know why. She was fantastic in Mad Max. I recently rewatched it. It is a shame, and she even said herself that she was a bit gutted not to be called back because, you know, that must be one of her favourite films that she's ever done, even though she didn't get along with Tom Hardy. There was a nightmare on set, that from what I've heard of some things that have happened there, but he wouldn't be in this film, and so I don't know. I don't know why they had to recast, but there you go.
Absolutely, and you know what, mate? It was a nightmare to shoot, and it's going to be even scarier for us to cover when we someday tackle Mad Max Fury Road.
What about the petition for 365, Jackson, being removed?
What about it?
There's thousands and thousands of votes to get this removed off Netflix. Would you believe that? And I didn't even start this petition.
You didn't start it, of all people.
And I didn't sign it yet. I think you know what I'm doing after this pod.
Listeners, you can hear him frantically typing away. That's Dan bringing up the petition as we speak.
But that was interesting, wasn't it? That people are that outraged. Maybe they listen to our podcast and off the back of that started the petition. That's what I like to think. But anyway.
That sounds about right. And you know what? For our first-time new listeners, people who may be joining us after listening to our excellent coverage on 365, we want to say thank you so much for joining us. We are super grateful. Dan, this has been enough padding. How about we get stuck in to today's episode?
Before we do, Jackson, I just want to take a moment to thank our sponsor for today, the PlayStation 5 Central Podcast. It's a podcast that covers all the latest news, rumors, leaks, and details on the PlayStation 5 and its games. It's hosted by yours truly, Dan Allen, joined by Vicar. PS5 Central Podcast is available now on all good platform services. Check it out if you're a fan of gaming and PlayStation. And also, thank you to
our sensational long-time sponsor, collaborator, best friend, confidant, maybe sometimes lover, ExpressVPN. You want to check out expressvpn.com/we watch this for 3 months free. Access any content no matter your location. Say goodbye to block services and websites. For example, if you're in the USA, you could get Australian Netflix, and with ExpressVPN, you can have access by changing your country to some movies and TV shows that we get before any other country does. Features are super simple, easy interface. We want you to get ExpressVPN, and we want you to use expressvpn.com/we watch this for 3 months free.
All right, let's get into our review for Hamilton.
This is Hamilton.
Experience Hamilton, the live theater performance in your home. Now on Disney Plus.
Perfect, that's definitely staying in.
Terms and conditions apply. Blah, 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 blah.
Swedish military intelligence officer Carl Hamilton is ordered to eliminate... What's wrong? What do you mean? Are we not talking about the Harold Savant 1998 Swedish action film starring Peter Stormare and Mark Hamill?
Why does this guy always get the movie wrong?
Wait, so you're telling me I've now got to spend another 2 hours and 40 minutes watching something I thought I already saw?
Sure do, mate. I'll stop the podcast now. We'll come back in 3 hours.
Hamilton is the story of America then, told by America now. Featuring a score that blends hip-hop, jazz, R&B, and show tunes, Hamilton has taken the story of American founding father Alexander Hamilton and created a revolutionary moment in theatre, a musical that has had a profound impact on culture, politics, and education. Captured at the Richard Rodgers Theatre on Broadway in June 2016, the film transports its audience into the world of the Broadway show in a uniquely intimate way. Now, our listeners, if it sounds like we're really selling the movie, that's because that awesome synopsis was written by Walt Disney Studios.
Classic.
Dan, we've both sat down and sadly had to do this separately, given the lockdown. Both sat down and watched Hamilton for the first time this past week. What did you think of I've just butchered his name. What did you think of Lin-Manuel Miranda's musical?
Jackson, I always take the first reins. I want you to take us off here for the first time. Give me your first thoughts on this movie, because I saw it a week ago now. I've got my thoughts, but hit a home run for us. Hit away.
My first thoughts, firing up Disney Plus. Dan, why did you schedule a 2 hour and 40-minute picture? That was thought number one. Okay, yep. I hit play. Okay, is this this looks like a staged musical. All right, this is going to be a different kind of experience. Who knows? Maybe we might even get an intermission throughout this thing. The song starts, we get some dancing ensembles, and you know what? The energy coming off the screen for the next 2 hours and 40 minutes. I was glued to my home theater setup. I could not take my eyes off, and it was so infectious. This wrapped me up. You said, Dan, that you watched this across 2 sittings. I did this in 1. This was such a great time. I was so entertained. And this has given it's going to inspire a lot of interesting conversation here between you and I, chatting about some of the themes and the performances and what Lin-Manuel.
Oh, we're never going to get his name right. We've got to just give him a nickname.
We can't even get the character names in something like a David Lynch or a Christopher Nolan movie, right? So I don't know how we're going to do it this. Let's go with Lin, okay? Lin, you and me, Lin. What Lin has done with writing these songs and putting together just a insane, enthralling experience is magical. We're a bit late here to the cultural zeitgeist for Hamilton because this debuted about 5 years ago on Broadway, and now we're only getting a recording here from 2016, finally dropping in 2020. Don't know how we missed it for so long, but what an experience. Love to see this live.
We were way off the ball, weren't we? We were way off the mark in terms of this has been around for years and the hype has always been there. It's always been hard to get a ticket, and if you did...
Totally off our radar.
It was extremely expensive, and it's one of those things...
Yeah, I've seen reports of what, $500 a seat?
Oh, I've seen $1,000 a seat. Yeah, I really enjoyed it, Jackson. I did watch it in 2 sittings. That's no fault of the movie. I was just quite tired when I started watching it. I didn't know it was that long. That's not a detriment to the movie at all, or if we can call it a movie. That's another topic we'll go into. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. The music is just incredible. You know, the soundtrack. I've got 12 or so songs already on Spotify lined up for next week to smash out and listen to, because just infectious. I couldn't believe there was that many tracks as well. There's like 50 tracks to go through.
I couldn't believe we didn't get a break throughout some of those numbers. I can think back to musical films, for example. I've seen something like Les Mis, or even some live stage shows when, you know, you get a break, you get a chance to breathe.
Yeah.
This is like 20 to 30 minutes of non-stop, and I'm sure it's must have been chopped down and put into this nice, neat, tight little package to watch either in the movie theaters as originally scheduled or now at home. But it just smashes you track after track after track, and everything's so memorable.
Lin-Manuel needs to be a track runner or a marathon runner, because how can you imagine how tiring that is for 3 hours?
How did this guy do it without breaking a sweat?
He didn't look like he broke a sweat. How can you
Seriously?
remember that many lines, that many songs, being on point the entire time? Like, yes, this was 3 different versions put into one. You know, they shot this back in 2016. Then they did a version of close-ups without the audience, and then they did another version again with live. But I've heard such rave reviews about this live theatre performance that this is great to see this is accessible to more people now. Although I'm not sure it captured the full live Broadway sort of essence. I've never been, so I wouldn't know. I do love theatre, though. I've been to many plays before. School of Rock, King Kong, just to name a few. But I'm not sure if it can capture the full essence of that. But you do get those close-ups and stuff like that, which you might not get in a live theatre.
Yes.
So yeah,
and some of those dolly and tracking shots, and the fact that we have that spinning stage, that's something that would be great in the theatre. But to see that captured on film, and we get to follow some of the actors going around that, Disney aren't kidding when they say it's an intimate experience. You feel like you're on the stage with them.
It's such a unique concept too, with the hip hop, rap, jazz, you know, blended into Hamilton. You know, this isn't something new. This is back in the 1800s or so. So
the 1700s. Who would have thought?
1700s. Yeah.
Did you think we'd ever give a shit here in July 2020 after the year that we've had? We'd care that much about America's founding fathers? I didn't think I did.
Wow. I didn't know much of the story, to be honest, either. So this was a little bit of a learning lesson as well, funnily enough. But yeah, I mean, it was originally scheduled for next year, this release in actual theaters, wasn't it? And then they had pushed it forward due to COVID. I wonder if this would have done well in theaters in terms of box office.
Absolutely. You know what, Dan? Disney actually snagged this one up as part of an estimated $75 million deal to bring these recordings to the big screen. And Bob Iger, at the time then Disney CEO, actually approached the production and approached Lin-Manuel when I've just butchered it again. Oh, we're gonna have a few of those Once Upon a Time in Hollywood sound bites here. He actually approached the Bob Iger approached the crew himself to tee this one up, and yeah, it would have been crazy to consider. I've got here October 15th, 2021 was the original scheduled release date in the theaters. And then given what's happened this year and also what's happened with the Broadway industry, is not only movies, but entertainment industry on the whole has been ravaged by COVID-19. It's looking like no Broadway shows are going to return for the rest of the year. This was pushed up by 15 months to Disney+. Dan, interesting news. This is currently scheduled. We haven't got a confirmed date, but it is scheduled to come out in theaters again next year in 2021. And I reckon it's going to do well. I think it's going to do gangbusters.
I reckon this is a great strategy. I reckon it's going to do even better now that the hype's there and people want to see this in the theaters now because people are loving this film. Resounding 10 out of 10s from a lot of fans of this, and they'll definitely go and see it. I could see this having good legs like a Greatest Showman. People love music. You know, it's a universal thing. Everyone, loves music, and this is pretty much 2.5 hours of great music, isn't it?
For sure. And you know what, mate? It's an awesome point you mentioned there that it's going to do even better. Consider some of the analytics here we have from this movie's release in only the last couple of weeks. So this is reported by Apptopia, who collect app analytics. Disney Plus downloads for the opening weekend of this film, that was Independence Day weekend, July 4th, over in the US, nearly 270,000 downloads, which was a 72% increase from the past 4 weeks total average. So the numbers for Disney Plus almost doubled just to watch this musical.
Wow.
They definitely didn't double for Artemis Fowl.
I think this is their cream of the crop sort of for the service right now. This is the
prestige product.
Since Mandalorian, this is the next big thing, I think, in terms of getting people to subscribe and having some quality content on the platform. They need more of this. I'd love to see more theatre productions like this, especially this year, because from what I heard, Jackson, Broadway are not coming back this year at all. They're definitely they're locked away for this year. So seeing more productions like this still gives us a little bit of the flavours and the feeling that of going back there. So yeah, I'd love to see more, but it's probably not going to happen. But hopefully this triggers something in the future for this to happen for some of these productions that we might not see, or some people might not have access to, like Hamilton, because it's one of those things where most people won't ever get to see this live, will they? Even if they wanted to, it's just not accessible.
No, you could be taking out a second or third mortgage on your home just to get a ticket to go and see this. But there were many reports when this first debuted 5 years ago and in the years preceding that if you did have a ticket to see Hamilton, be it in the UK or the US, on or off Broadway, you're likely to rub shoulders with celebrities, people like Michelle Obama, Beyonce and Jay-Z. In fact, Lin-Manuel tells a funny story about he was sick the night that Beyonce and Jay-Z came to see the musical. So,
oh wow! Imagine
crazy to think who you'd see there.
Trying to follow up with him if you were his backup.
His understudy.
Yeah, imagine that. Oh.
Well, imagine going out there and having to rap in front of Jay-Z.
Yeah. Oh, I just don't know how they remembered everything and just did it so on point. I think it's unbelievable. But what's even crazier is this cast was pretty much unknown when this first came out. Most of these names, and they're still relatively not very big names. A lot of the cast here, David Diggs, Renee Goldsberry, they're not huge names, but the talent on offer here, I hope to see them in some big Hollywood productions in the future, especially with the talent that's on offer here, what they've done. I think a standouts like Chris Jackson was a standout for me as George Washington.
Oh, as George Washington.
And also Leslie Odom Jr. I think he was absolutely phenomenal as well. I'd say they're better than
I
Lin.
believe that they both picked up Tony Awards.
Did they? Okay, yeah.
When this first debuted on Broadway, and Leslie Odom Jr. It's a little tragic that in this bombastic 2.5 hours that his performance kind of falls by the wayside. We don't get as many of those intimate close-ups of him because there is so much happening and it's so tough to follow. But I love his performance here. It's very reminiscent of F. Murray Abraham as Salieri in Amadeus, Milos Forman's classic movie that came out there in the late 80s. But some other standouts, Dan, you said it, David Diggs in a dual role, which he just smashed out of the park. He's rapping, and particularly trying to do a French accent as well. That would be so hard. Who knows how he pulled it off? And he's gone in to star in some movies that have released in the last couple of years. Renee Elise Goldsberry, you said her too. She was in Waves, which I can't watch. I know you saw that recently. And Philippa Sue, who I thought her performance at first was a little plain. There wasn't much going on with her character, Eliza. But then she got that awesome number to herself there at the end that closed out the whole production and smashed it. So you said it, mate. A lot of unknowns, and it'd be great to see them pick up some other performances. To be able to have to sing and dance and act all in one is, I don't know, total package.
You much of a theatre geek? Have you gone out and seen a lot of live performances, or where would you sit?
I can't say I have. No, you definitely couldn't put me under there like a musical theatre geek like you could a cinephile or even a gamer in some aspects. So no, we are going to go through and give some recommendations of some other movie musicals we want our listeners to check out a bit later on here in this episode. What about you, mate? Are you a theatre geek?
I wouldn't say theatre geek, but I do enjoy going out a couple of times a year and seeing what's out there. Like I said, one of my favourites, School of Rock, which I've seen about 3 times. Once in actually New York.
Wow.
Once in New York Broadway. And a couple of times here in Melbourne. King Kong, what else have I seen? I've seen all the classics. I haven't seen Cats. I've seen... look, that's the thing. People might be confused, though, that this is actually just a recording of... This isn't like a...
it's not a live-action adaptation.
It's not a live adaptation. It's not like Les Mis. It's not like Cats. This is just recording the actual actors on a stage. But it works so well.
Does that make it a movie?
I wanted to ask you that. Is this in
consideration? I beat you to it, as usual.
Is this in consideration for Oscars, for awards? How does this work?
It's not.
It's not?
It's out of contention for Oscars.
That's confirmed.
Which I can see you wearing that look on your face, Dan. You wanted to see maybe a best original song or a best original or a best score nomination for this one. It's confirmed. This is not in Oscar contention.
There you go. Wow. Okay. Well, it picked up thousands of Tony Awards, didn't it? So it's not like it didn't get many awards. I think this broke records, didn't it?
And this has been super successful on Broadway. So when this debuted in 2015, reported budget of $12.5 million for the production. It's gone on to gross since over $612 million just on Broadway on the stage from over 1,500 performances ever since. Dan, it's actually the 7th
performances.
1,500.
Oh my goodness gracious!
That's a lot of uses of Alexander Hamilton. This is the 7th highest grossing Broadway musical of all time. Just to put this in the same kind of league. The Lion King is number 1, and that's reported at having grossed over $1.6 billion on Broadway. So $612 million on Broadway is not something to screw your nose up at. The Lion King as well, that had a $27.5 million production budget. So compare the 12.5 to an almost double for The Lion King. So it seems to be quite modest for Broadway. And let's look at another Broadway musical, Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark, which is one of the most infamous Broadway bombs. That was directed by Julie Taymor and had music from Bono and Edge. Well, that had the biggest ever Broadway budget, $75 million, and that never turned a profit in its 3-year run. So for this, from Lin-Manuel, to do $600 million, be super profitable and enter the cultural zeitgeist is astonishing, right?
Crazy. And he went on to do Moana soundtrack, which was one of the best Disney soundtracks as well. Maybe that's how the relationship with Disney came about. Because I don't know, does he own the property of this musical, or how does it work? Because there is a director attached to this, Thomas Cale, who did a great job, mind you. But do you know that? Do you know who owns this? Or I'm guessing Lin has some sort of stake in it for the amount of work he's done.
Correct. You could almost, if you wanted to put on your negative Nancy cap, you could look at it as a very narcissistic turn from Lin-Manuel, because he wrote, produced, and starred in the original production, and of course starred in it here. When they filmed this in 2016, these were some of the last performances. It was the last couple weeks featuring this original cast. To the best of my understanding, he would own some of these musical rights and some of the production rights, but the film rights, so I guess then in turn the media rights, would be owned by Disney. So I suppose if Disney wanted to turn this into their own feature adaptation, like we saw with Cats, bit of a shudder there, or Les Mis, they could do so, but I imagine that Lin-Manuel would have a huge hand to play in that. What do you think about his kind of public perception? He seems to be this very earnest, endearing, and energizing character within the public spectrum. You look at him and you're like, how can anyone hate this guy, right?
Yeah, I don't think he has. He hasn't done many Hollywood films, though, has he? This was his big sort of break. Correct me if I'm wrong, sorry. This was his big break, wasn't it?
He did have one other musical that came out several years prior, which he had produced. I believe it's called. Is it In the Heights?
Okay, because I know he was in Mary Poppins, and I've seen him pop up a lot in the last few years. But besides that, I didn't know of him. So
me neither. All of it is off the back of him. And you know what? I knew about him before I knew about this musical. So consider that.
Me too. I was blinded by this musical. I didn't have any of the hype. Like most people did. I just couldn't believe this sort of hidden community that came out here and just burst out the seams. I just don't know how he came up with the songs. I still can't wrap my head around how he's come up with all the different beats, and it's just sort of mind-boggling to me because there's so much here that it's all different. I feel. And how many words are spoken in this? Like, this must be a record.
Oh my goodness. Lin-Manuel kind of has like the cadence of someone like Eminem as he's spewing out these raps.
He does.
And he's such a wordsmith. He must compare himself to Alexander Hamilton as well. How, considering that man was a wordsmith and produced so much written works and so many essays during his 49-year lifespan, that Lin-Manuel Miranda must look at him and go, geez, if that guy can do it, why can't I? It must have attracted him and inspired him to the project. And you said it, Dan, this musical, it's kind of like Stephen Sondheim meets LL Cool J, with just how many different influences it has from rap and then classic Broadway and theatre. It doesn't have that anachronistic kind of feel that you might think it would by having some of these rap and hip-hop R&B influences and then taking it back to the 18th century. Don't know how they did it, but he's weaved it in so perfectly.
With the cast that you said they did, you said that this has been done over 1,500 times, correct? That wasn't all the original cast, I'm guessing?
No, correct. I believe after about 2016 and 2017, they did start bringing in some new cast and members as the main crew. So some of them could have been understudies, and like I mentioned, that it was the last couple of weeks of that original run where they used this cast, and even Jonathan Groff, who's gone on to some fame. He played King George in this, and that's a very interesting performance we can talk about. He'd actually left the production by the time they were filming the recordings, and they brought him back specifically just to do the recordings.
He was fantastic. I loved him.
Absolute standout. He just, what's that first song? Is it You'll Be Back? And it's just those close-ups of him on stage.
There it is. He brings it back every time. He was fantastic. He was a bit of comedy relief as well, which it needed, I think. I've seen him in a few things. I've definitely seen him. Was it Mindhunters he was in?
I believe so, yes.
David Fincher? Yeah.
Is that a David Fincher produced?
I think so. Yeah, he was fantastic, and I want to go back and watch Mindhunter now. See him in a bit of a different role.
I still haven't seen that. It's sitting there on the 2,476 film watch list, even being a TV show.
So we've gone on about how good this is. Did you have any negatives, Jackson, on this? Did you find anything a little bit unusual or anything you would have changed?
I do want to make some points here, Dan. This originally debuted in 2015, and this recording's from 2016, and it's come out at an awfully urgent time here in July 2020. We've had some of these figures who were portrayed in this production in a very positive light. Some of their statues have recently been torn down from some of these Black Lives Matters protests, and they've been torn down because some of these characters, how do we put this without getting too controversial? We definitely have no idea what we're talking about here, listeners. As usual on the We Watch This Movie podcast, we don't claim to be experts of any kind other than having read some second or third hand article. But if some of these characters potentially were real slave drivers, and the issues of slavery are kind of mentioned once or twice in passing throughout the play and then brushed aside, that's a little concerning. And I get that we have this, I don't even know if it's like colorblind casting. It's almost like reverse casting, where someone who would be white in the 18th century is now from the Caribbean, like Lin-Manuel, or we have some of the African-American actors. Sure, that's an interesting spin on some of this material, but we can't put aside and we can't throw under the rug some of the complicated histories behind these men. If we want to put them in like an angelic light and say, oh, weren't the founding fathers fantastic in what they did for the US and gaining independence from Britain and fighting as revolutionaries? Well, what about some of the negative things that they set up, such as slavery? That's a bit interesting to consider. So some parts of the production do feel like they were from 2015. It might only be 5 years ago, but so much has changed, not just in the US, but in the global complexion, that it can be tough to swallow. If, though, you go into this with your brain totally switched off and you're not thinking about some of those negative aspects, you will still love it. And they don't tarnish the overall experience. At least they didn't for me. You might have a different opinion, though.
I didn't actually think about that, but now you say it, it is little bit of a grey area that I don't know if anyone's sort of talked about, really, from what I've seen. But yeah, that's interesting, because there's a lot of people of colour in this film, in this theatre production, and whether that would happen back then, yeah, I don't know. It's a tough one to think about.
And consider, what would these founding fathers, if you plucked them from the 18th century in a kind of Bill and Ted style and brought them in a time machine through to here in 2020, if they were to watch this, what would they think of some of these African Americans and people of Puerto Rican descent playing them?
Yeah, you're right. This is a touchy subject, but it is something to think about. No, so you would say that was a negative? That actually took you out of it? Because I didn't think about that. Although, yeah.
It's very nitpicky. Even just through a few minutes of research looking into the Schuller family, where the sisters are from, particularly Eliza, who goes on to marry Alexander Hamilton. Well, if Alexander Hamilton is marrying into their wealth, marrying into their fame and fortune, he's actually marrying into a slave-driving family. But, look, we want to mention those points for our listeners who are out there going, geez, that sounds really radical, and they've made a play about this. The play isn't anything about that, okay? It's far more positive. It's released by Disney, so you know what you're in for.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't... Do you think they glorified these people as bad or good in any way in this? Like...
Because it doesn't choose to explore some of those themes and really delve deep into them, you can kind of imagine that it takes a stance. It's sitting on the fence. In 2020, can you be sitting on the fence? It's almost like you've got to be on the left or you've got to be on the right. You can't be in the dead middle. You can't be neutral. So that's tough. Because this is something from 2015, it does feel of its time in that respect. And I'm going to, you know what? Here, mate, we're in lockdown. We're in Australia. We're both in our 20s. I'm going to sit on the fence and say, this isn't my hill to die on. I'm not flying my flag here, all right?
Yeah. I haven't seen much backlash about that, though. There hasn't been, has there?
I've seen some.
You have? Okay. Is this from news drivers, though, that are looking for clicks on an article, or is this a community of people?
Oh, I have seen this among the community. In fact, when I went through here and looked at some of the user scores compared to what the critics thought of this production having only come out in the last few weeks, I kind of saw that echoed a little bit. So how about we get into it?
Jackson's segment.
Jackson's ratings.
IMDb, Rotten Tomatoes, audience score, and Letterboxd.
IMDb, Rotten Tomatoes, audience score, and Letterboxd. How about you sing that in the style of
do you like
Alexander Hamilton?
Do you like that tune now, Jackson? Have you come to love it yet?
It's like a parasite. It's just infesting itself on me, slowly taking over. How about you sing it in the style of something from this production?
IMDb, Rotten Tomatoes, audience score, Letterboxd.
Nailed it. Okay, IMDb. Here we go. Right out of the gate. 9 out of 10 from nearly 20,000 user ratings. And 9 out of 10, Dan. Surely you'd think this would be on the IMDb top 250 of all time, right?
Not enough votes yet?
I don't know if it's not enough votes. I don't believe it's up there because it's technically not a movie.
Oh.
So IMDb have taken a stance.
You're kidding.
It's not up there. So to the best of my knowledge, from what I could find, because this is a recording of a stage production, they're not going to consider it a film. And again, the Oscars won't either. Here we go. Rotten Tomatoes has already collated 157 critical reviews covering this film. Only 2 of them were rotten. This has an average score of 9.21 out of 10, which is massive. Critics have loved it. 99% of them have given it a fresh review. Wow. Audiences. 92% of audiences gave this one a positive review. So slightly down, it's had over 1,000 ratings, an average score of 4.62 out of 5. Are we really pulling it at hairs here, nitpicking it? I suppose, but, there is some negativity out there. Metacritic as well. So far, Dan, at the time of our recording, this is the number 2 best movie of 2020 and number 11 most discussed film of 2020. What do you reckon number 1 is?
Most discussed film?
Yep.
Bam.
Well, it hasn't released.
Okay, what's been released? 365? No.
Almost. It's actually Sonic the Hedgehog. It doesn't even feel like that was released this year.
I thought that was 2017.
All the news we've had. God,
Has that come out this year? Did I go and see that this year? No way.
Didn't that come out at the height of Jim Carrey's career in the mid-90s, straight after The Mask? Like, it honestly feels like it could have been then.
Wow.
Metacritic has this at 90 from 42 critic reviews, and 150 users have submitted their scores for an average of 7.8 out of 10. So again, some of the online internet community hasn't been as kind to this picture. It could also be a bit of review bombing. They might not like Disney. Who knows? Finally, you've all been waiting for it. Someday, they're going to put their hand out and say, come join us in the sacred land. It's time. Letterboxd. 4.3 out of 5. Huge score from over 50,000 users having watched it, and it's been favorited by over 24,000 members.
Compared
So
to
I think there are a
365,
lot of
how many
muso-
did that have? 10 favorites?
I think it had about 3. There are a lot of muso heads and a lot of musical theatre nuts out there who are loving this picture.
That's good to see.
That's 100% staying in. Just add the cricket sound, please.
Just no follow-up at all. Just, yeah,
Nah.
It's a podcast and you're supposed to talk. Yeah, that's good. That's good. That's it. So this actually has more 10s than any other rating, doesn't it, on Letterboxd, which is really... That's when you know that it's usually a pretty good film. That was the same for...
This is a unique movie, in quotation marks.
The last time I saw that was Fight Club. I think that had the more 10s than any other rating.
Except you're not allowed to talk about it.
Yeah, I'm looking now and it's just 4.5, 4, 5, people are loving the film, and it's the music. I have to say it. It's the music. They absolutely nail the music. If they didn't get that right, you're not going to get these astounding reviews that they're getting. And like I said, I got 15 tracks on my Spotify. I don't know if you are the same, Jackson. Are you going to be putting a few on your workout playlist or what?
Oh, for sure, mate. I cannot wait to belt out of the gym talking about My Shot and George Washington as we move those weights up and down.
I have to say, Shots was a great song. One Last Time is up there for me. You'll Be Back by our man, Jonathan Groff.
Oh.
Alexander Hamilton,
absolute bangers.
Yorktown. Yeah, there's some bangers in there.
There's so much, I can't even remember them.
Well, yeah, you're
stuffed.
fresh off it, aren't you? So, you might. Is this... Look, I wanted to ask you this as well. 2 hours, 40 minutes. Would you go back and watch it again? Or would you have it in the background playing? Or... Because I've had it in the background doing some work. I've had it just on the background.
Dan, I said at the top of the pod, 2 hours and 40 minutes sounded really daunting. And by the time I hit the intermission halfway through, I was ready for the next hour and a half, and I kind of didn't want it to end. So sure, why not? I'd sit through this again.
Yeah.
I don't know if I do it every day. I mean,
No.
for the low price of, what is it here in Australia at the moment? $9 Australian per month. You could watch this every day. You could watch this 30 times compared to spending $500 or $1,000 for a seat on Broadway. Would the $1,000 be worth it? That's not for us to decide. But to watch this 30 times in a month for $9, you could do a heck of a lot worse. You could watch 365 30 times over.
Tell me, whose Disney Plus account did you watch this on?
All right, that's been another great episode here today at the We Watch This Movie podcast.
Yeah, you know exactly who it was. Yeah, so you got no other negatives that you wanted to touch on besides that?
Besides that, Dan, I think this is another film that we're going to be gushing over for some time.
Who did you think the standout was in this?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. I'm glad you asked. Look, I loved Daveed Diggs whenever he showed up in the supporting role, be it as the Frenchman, whose name I'm so sorry I can't remember early on, and then showed up again as Thomas Jefferson. Considering this is Lin-Manuel Miranda's work, you have to mention the guy. Him and Hamilton just go hand in hand. His fingerprints are everywhere.
I don't think he's the standout of this at all.
Hit me.
In terms of on the stage, I don't think he's even in the top 3.
Well, he plays the straight man. Everyone else is kind of bouncing around full of energy and life around him, and he's there keeping it coherent and holding it together.
True.
I want to give a nod. Leslie Odom Jr. I mentioned before, his performance at times kind of feels buried throughout this recorded version. I'd love to see him really sink his teeth into a starring role in maybe an A24 picture.
Yeah,
Who's your standout?
I think Chris Jackson, I absolutely loved his performance as George Washington. All the songs that he did were some of my favorites. And I also, Leslie Odom Jr. I thought was a standout as well. And even Anthony Ramos, he was pretty good. Everyone does a great job, I have to say.
Yeah, Anthony Ramos, his dual roles were practically unrecognizable.
Yeah.
In fact, if you watch this in 2 sittings, you'd think it was 2 different actors up there.
Yeah, Lin-Manuel, he was good. I just didn't think he was the big standout of this. I don't think he was the big star that everyone's saying here. That's
Overrated?
just my opinion. No, I wouldn't say overrated, but I feel like he wasn't. Yeah, he just wasn't this big star everyone's talking about. I really liked Jonathan Groff as well. Like I said, I liked Renee. Yeah, the whole cast are great. I just wonder, Jackson, if we were to see this in a live performance without these main cast, with fill-ins or other people, would it be as good? I'm just not sure.
It's an interesting point. You said it, Dan, the music. And if we're going to get that music so expertly performed with a different cast, I feel like it's going to be an awesome experience. A different experience. There is something lost between trying to translate a musical from being in the theatre to then being on the screens, especially like this when it's literally just recorded from being on stage. So, I don't know. I'd check it out. Having watched this, I'd go check it out. Would you check this out on the big screen? We've been talking about this now at length for some time. Let's flash forward 12 months, and this comes out July 4th weekend 2021. Would you go see it?
Yeah, I'd be there.
All right, I'll join you.
I'd be going, yeah. I'd definitely go. So with that said, why don't we jump into our final ratings, Jackson? Kick us off.
8 out of 10 spewing solos. Loved it. Thought it was great. Would go back and watch it again. Very different kind of movie here for the podcast. Pretty much not a film. We're not going to complain. It's our show, not yours. If you don't want to stick around, we don't blame you.
I'd join you there, Jackson, with an 8. Solid 8 out of 10. Everything you said, I think we pretty much agree on this wholeheartedly.
What a boring episode.
It took us 25 episodes to get there, or whatever number pod this is. But yeah, I think it's close to a must-see. Even if you're not a theatre geek, give it a go. Just and see if you enjoy it or not. And, even if you're not fully engaged and you might have it on in the background for some parts, or you do take the intermission to have a rest and come back another day like I did, just give it a crack and see if you enjoy it, because I think a lot of people are surprised by how much they like this. I think you being one of them, Jackson.
Absolutely.
Going in, 2 hours, 40 minutes is a bit daunting, and then you see it's a musical, and it's, it's a bit, people have their perceptions, so I think you might be surprised. So definitely check out Hamilton. All right, Jackson, before we head off for today, why don't we give some recommendations on some movie musicals? Kick us off.
Please. All right. Listeners, if you enjoyed Hamilton, or you want to get a bit of a different perspective on some other movie musicals to check out, here's 3 I'm going to recommend. You want to go watch The Rocky Horror Picture Show? You want to see Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory? And Little Shop of Horrors. I've taken 3 older movie musicals there, all 3 featuring different genres of music. Little Shop of Horrors and Rocky Horror Picture Show do feature some kind of old-time rock in there, and then some more modern stuff. And Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, a true children's classic that may hold up even better as you get older. So please go check those out off the back of watching Hamilton. Dan, what's 3 recommendations you've got for our listeners?
I've got one here, and some people aren't going to be a fan of this. It was Rock of Ages. I thought Rock of Ages was actually pretty good. Tom Cruise was one of the main leads.
You're laughing.
Back in 2011, but I love all the tracks in it. I think it's great, bit of fun. It's got Tom Cruise, Julian Ho, Russell Brand, Alec Baldwin. It's an interesting cast, but give it a crack. See if you like rock. I mean, that's the place to start. Another movie musical. I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up my man HJ, huge jacked man, in The Greatest Showman.
Oh, you haven't mentioned that one before.
Absolutely love it. Check out The Greatest Showman if you haven't. And third, probably 8 Mile. If you like the rap in this, it's not so dissimilar to 8 Mile in some parts, with the little rap battles that they do in the debate of Hamilton. Bit similar to 8 Mile. So 8 Mile's a bit, maybe not a movie musical. It's I guess it's in that realm, but I'd definitely recommend that. I know a lot of you have already seen it, but even going back, it's still worth a watch. So 8 Mile, they're my 3.
Nice. What a lovely way to wrap up this episode. And you know what? With some of these movie musicals, and especially Hamilton, like all great art should, and many of the films that we've covered here on the podcast, such as To Five Bloods and Midsommar, or even 365 Days, this picture and those have inspired conversation, and they will continue to provoke interesting discussion. And we want you, the listeners, to stick around. Yes, Dan, I did just say 365 Days is inspirational.
Well, 365 Days is our most played pod. Just straight off
What
the
a
bat,
shame!
guys. It's our most played pod by a mile. People are tuning into this thing every single day, and we thank you if you've just come aboard. But that's going to be it for today's episode. One other thing before we go. That movie I mentioned at the top, our 10th anniversary, our next review, guys. Are you ready? Drum roll, please, editor. Inception.
A little indie film you've never heard of.
Our little indie film from some indie director, up-and-comer, is our next podcast. Jackson, Paul, get your notes ready. This is going to be huge.
This is going to be a mammoth episode. This could be our longest one yet. This could be longer than the movie.
It's going to be 2 hours. I reckon this is going to be huge.
If our editor thought he had it tough for the last 2 episodes, he's going to have it real hard here.
I don't know about you, mate, but I might have 10 pages of notes for this one, so this is going to be great. But I hope you watch it. I'm going to watch it twice in preparation. I'm that excited.
Would you watch it backwards?
Anyway, guys, thanks for tuning in. Please follow us over on Spotify if you can. Leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. Check us out on Google Podcasts. Wherever you get your podcasts, make sure you're following us to be updated on when we release a new episodes. Jackson, where can they find us on social media?
You can find us, the We Watch This Movie podcast, at We Watch This Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, Letterboxd, Twitter, even on TikTok. You can find Dan at Dan Allen Movies on Instagram, Letterboxd, Twitter, and Facebook. You can find me at Marshall on Film on Facebook, Letterboxd, Instagram, Twitter, sometimes on TikTok. With that, listeners, he is Dan Allen Movies. I am Marshall on Film. This is the We Watch This Movie podcast, and we are out of time.
See you later.